Yeah, thank you, Alami. And thanks everyone for joining. We will dive straight into the topic for today, which is writing abstracts that get noticed. And specifically, we will be looking at what exactly is meant by an abstract, what's an abstract, and then what types do we have. And in terms of classification, classification by purpose as well as classification by structure. And then we will take a look at the core qualities of a good abstract and look at the steps we should take. I should quickly point out that it's difficult to say that we have a particular pattern that everyone must follow, but we can have a guide. And then we'll look at some do's and some don'ts when we're writing abstracts. And then we'll take one example of an abstract and try to dissect that before we take questions and maybe general discussion at the end. So the first question is, what exactly is an abstract? And I remember that as a student myself, it was a difficult thing to understand. The notion I had originally was that an abstract had to be abstract, which means that it has to be something like something that's coded and requires serious thinking to decode. But I can tell you that that's exactly what an abstract should not be. An abstract is the exact opposite of that. It is meant to be very clear and easy to understand. It shouldn't be abstract in that sense. It shouldn't be abstract in the sense of being difficult or being something you can't really figure out or you can't easily decode. That's and so for that reason, we'll start by describing abstract itself. What exactly do we mean? If we say we have an abstract, if we're to reduce that to just one word, then we'll say that word is summary. So an abstract is a self-contained summary of the entire work. So if you have done a study, and sometimes you would have written a report that's running into maybe tens of thousands of pages, but you may be required to summarize all of that in maybe 150 words, or sometimes 200 words, 250 words, sometimes 300 words. And the idea is that that summary is self-contained, which means that on its own, it can be understood fully, which means that it's going to contain everything that you have in the full report that you have written. And for many of us, if, for instance, you have a manuscript, in that manuscript, you have the background or the introduction section, have the method section, findings. Sometimes you have the discussion, the conclusion, even though typically we don't include the discussion in an abstract. But the idea is that all of these major components of the report are contained in that abstract. And then the abstract now forms a very powerful summary that should encourage people to read the entire work. But I want to tell you that your abstract is the only thing many people will read. Most readers will not go beyond the abstract. Most reviewers, many reviewers, will not go beyond the abstract. It is that abstract that helps people decide whether to go on to read or to just skip. If you're talking about a journal article or a manuscript going through peer review, it is at the abstract level that sometimes reviewers decide whether they want to accept or they want to reject what you have submitted. If it's for the purpose of a conference, it is from the abstract that reviewers or the committee sometimes will determine whether to invite you to make a presentation at the conference or not. The simple implication is that you have at most 300 words to make the best impression you can possibly make, which means that there is no room for error, no room. If you have an excellent study and you don't have a good abstract, that excellent study may just be passed by, may be dropped, it may be rejected just because there is no good abstract. And it is for this reason that it's important that we give so much attention to the abstract. Your abstract should have two major qualities. The first one is that the abstract has to be concise. If we say it is concise, it means that it's going to eliminate every form of redundancy. The implication is that every word that appears in your abstract must earn its place. So you don't add words to the abstract because you need more words. I mean, the reality is that you don't have enough room to express what ideas you have in the full paper that you want to summarize. Okay, so it's always such that you need every little space and every word has to justify its place in the abstract, which means that when you're writing an abstract, you can't be redundant. You can't use words that are redundant. You'll say the most using the fewest words possible. That's the idea. And that's an art that everyone has to master. I have some examples here. Rather than say the study employed a quantitative survey research method, if you just say we conducted a survey, you have conveyed the same message. Nothing is lost. Because you know that if you have a survey, it is quantitative. And we know that it's a method of research. So there should be no redundancy. And this will require that you read through your abstract multiple times so that you refine and make as concise as possible. And there are several other examples. If you say the outcome that practitioners neither have in mind nor plan for is, on the surface, you'll say that there is no problem with writing that way. But you can say the same thing in a zippier, sharper, better way. If you say the unintended consequence is this, you have taken care of all of those words that you have in the first column. So what you could say with 10 words, if you're a concise writer, you can say in maybe 4 words. And that's what we aim to achieve when we write abstracts. So we have to be very concise. The other thing is that it has to be comprehensive, which means that it has to include everything that matters, such that that abstract can stand on its own. So if we read the abstract and there are so many gaps, there are unanswered questions, it can't stand alone, then there is a problem. It is for that reason that when writing your abstract, you're thinking about the whole and you're doing everything possible to make sure that you're representing the whole in the writing. Now, we can classify abstracts based on function, or if you like, based on purpose. In other words, abstracts serve different purposes, and it's important that you carefully consider your audience, consider your discipline and what the tradition is in your discipline, and also consider the submission requirements while deciding what type of abstract you're writing. It's possible, for instance, to have an informative abstract that gives a complete overview of the study, which means that in terms of the scope or the contents, such an abstract will have the background, it will indicate what gap the study hopes to fill, to clearly show the objectives, the methods, the results, and the conclusions. So in writing this, you'll need to be detailed and comprehensive, while at the same time being concise. And that's what we have in most journals. If you're writing a journal article and you need to develop an abstract, that abstract should be an informative abstract. It's also possible that you have a descriptive abstract or an indicative abstract, which serves pretty much like a table of contents, so to say, or a brief description of the content, what the article covers, without saying much about the findings. If you write this way, then you'll be putting together a descriptive abstract. So you'll state your topic, the scope or the content of the writing. This usually will be brief in comparison with an informative abstract. You can also have a critical or an evaluative abstract, and this is commonly used when we review maybe works review. If you have a book review, for instance, or you have you're reviewing a dissertation, then you can have a critical or an evaluative abstract. So this is one form of classification. We can classify based on the function or the purpose that we hope to achieve. It's also possible that we classify abstracts based on structure. That is, whether the abstract is structured or it is unstructured. If you say an abstract is structured, it means that that abstract is divided into clearly labeled sections. So you'll see some abstracts that will have subheadings like background or introduction, will have methods, results, conclusion, and so on. If you have that, then you'll say that you have a structured abstract. If it is unstructured, it means that you have just one paragraph, and usually it's italicized. What works usually will depend on maybe your discipline or the journal. Journals will specifically state what their preference is. Conference organizers also will state whether they want the abstracts to be structured or to be unstructured. And typically, the structured abstracts will be longer, sometimes between, say, 250, 350 words. The unstructured abstracts can be shorter. So because of what we have said, it's important that we also check the guidelines before formatting. If you use a wrong structure, if you submit an unstructured abstract to a conference asking for structured abstracts, you may have your submission nullified. So we should keep this in mind. And this is an example of a structured abstract. You'll see here the background, the methods, results, and conclusion. We're not writing all of this in a single paragraph. This is an example of an abstract that is unstructured, written in a single paragraph. The first thing to note is that the abstract is best written last. Often people write the abstracts. In fact, sometimes people write the abstracts before doing their analysis. They write the abstracts before writing the results section, before drawing their conclusions. And that's the way to not write an abstract. And if you choose to write the abstract that way, the correct thing to do is to write the abstract after completing the full paper and accurately summarize what you have in the paper. You just imagine what you have not written. Can tell that will be very difficult. Okay. So that's the first decision, that you have to put together the full paper for writing the abstract. You have to do, especially your analysis. Your research questions must be clear. Of course, you start with the research problem. It's after writing all of these, drawing your conclusions, that you want to write your abstract. But the starting point will be to frame the problem correctly, properly. The problem has to be clear. We need to have a strong opening statement, a strong opening background statement that will provide general information about the subject matter, about the problem that we're interested in. And then we'll need to follow that with information about what is known, and then the gaps that exist that the current study seeks to fill. So in writing all of this, I always encourage that we are modest. Watch your language. You don't make sweeping claims. This is the first study in the whole of Africa that is, you never can be so sure. So modesty is key. So once we have that background, we will need to clearly state the aim or the purpose of the study. What exactly, so you want to summarize the objective of that study. And one sentence usually will be enough. It should be very direct. It should be clear what the study set out to achieve. And after that, we also want to describe the methods, briefly talk about the study design, the sources of data, and how you analyze your data. This shouldn't go beyond 2 sentences. And after that, the results. What are the key findings? If your study is quantitative, then you want to show maybe summary statistics of the findings. What exactly did you find out? Don't say things like the results were significant. We see things like that, or the tests were significant. No, we want to clearly show, for instance, that female entrepreneurs are 3.5 times more likely to pay back loans than male entrepreneurs. And you want to quote maybe the odds ratio and things like that. So it has to be clear. And at the end, you want to draw your conclusion and make the conclusion clear. That is, how exactly have we answered the research question? What's our answer to the primary research question? So we should state our conclusions and also draw implications so that it is clear what the major takeaways are. That's the essence. Whether you're talking about the takeaways for practitioners or for policymakers, for researchers, this should be clear. Another thing to carefully consider will be language, and then the style. We should be clear, which means that there should be no ambiguity in the writing. It's important that we know the audience and that we communicate with the audience. The abstract has to appeal to the widest possible audience, because sometimes we feel that, okay, I am a political scientist, so once I use this term, every political scientist will understand what I'm talking about. But you never can tell who is going to be reading that work. In fact, you can't even tell who is going to be assessing the work. And so the language should be something that appeals to the widest possible audience. If you're a sociologist, an economist should be able to understand what you're talking about. For that reason, you should avoid the use of jargons or acronyms, except for widely used, well-known acronyms. If, for instance, you say GDP or you say WHO, you can be sure that the wide range of readers will understand what you're talking about. But if you're using acronyms that are not known outside your field, that's a red flag. It's not helpful in any way. Then your language has to be plain, it has to be simple. And you should always ask yourself, if someone in a cognate discipline reads my abstract, will that person understand without requiring any further explanation? Okay. Will the person understand what I did? Will the person understand why this study is important? Will this person understand my findings, irrespective of that person's discipline? So if you can't confidently say that they will, then you have to start again. Okay. Often people are not sure as to whether they should use the passive voice or the active voice. I know that many of us would have done this in our secondary school English, even though we could also have just done it to pass and then we have moved on. But it's important that we give attention to this. That is, choose whether you want your subject to come at the beginning of your sentence, that's before the verb, or you want the subject to come at the end, which means that it is receiving. Now, passive writing can be a little problematic. One, it makes it difficult to be concise if your writing is passive, and for that reason, it's helpful. It's better to write using the active voice. We did this. MDAs optimized, for instance, look at what we have here. The MDAs optimized the opportunity to scale up the intervention. Reads better than the opportunity to scale up the intervention was optimized by the MDAs. So the active voice is what is recommended. It's better. Some journals, for instance, may insist that, especially for the method section, that we don't use the active voice, maybe because and of course this has to do with traditions in different disciplines. But some will say that you should avoid the use of the active voice in that section. If you don't have such an instruction in the guide, then the advice is that your writing should be largely active. It reads better. It makes writing and reading better. I mentioned earlier that as much as possible, we should avoid jargon. We should not use words that are limited to our own different disciplines. Rather, we should try as much as possible to communicate with the widest possible audience. Okay, so One tip, read your abstract aloud. If while reading it, there are hiccups, if you stumble, then you can be sure that the reader will also find it difficult. Then you should ask a colleague outside your own discipline to read it. Then if a term needs a paragraph to explain, then it doesn't belong in the abstract, which means that if you have one difficult concept and you think that to explain it, you need 3-4 sentences and you need to define it, then get it out of your abstract. It shouldn't be there. Okay. Use familiar words. The idea is not to impress. The idea is to communicate. So from what we've been saying, we should always respect the word limits. If conference organizers say that you should limit your writing to 50 words, please don't do 251 words. If they ask you to create sections and structure your abstract, please do so. Then you should choose your keywords very carefully. The keywords will determine the discoverability of your article in databases. So they should be chosen carefully and they should be chosen outside your title. So maybe that's another topic entirely, but it's something you want to carefully consider because it has implications for how easily that work will be discoverable when people are searching. Like we said earlier, your abstract should be the last thing you write. A number of do's, you should start with a compelling, focused opening sentence. In writing, we talk about the hook. If you write and nothing to captivate or hold the reader, if you are not able to grab the attention of the reader, then there is a problem. Then in the results section, you should report actual results. Don't say results were found. Don't say the test was significant. That doesn't say anything. So you report specific findings. Those specific findings will persuade the reader better than vague statements like results were, or the tests were significant. Then you should match the abstract to the paper. Every claim in the abstract must be supported with evidence in the full paper. Don't oversell. Don't forget that many organizers, many conference organizers, many journals will still need to check some of those claims in the full paper. Okay. So those are some of the do's. Avoid sweeping statements, especially when people talk about originality or what is novel in their work. Sometimes they're quick to say this is the first study ever to do one thing or to do another thing. That's not a very safe claim to make. And like we said, if a concept is difficult to explain, then it should not appear in your abstracts as much as possible. Your terms should be familiar, simple terms. Your expression should be clear. You shouldn't have citations or references in your abstracts. And then, like I said, let it not be the first thing you're going to write. So before you submit, you could use this as a checklist. Can that abstract stand alone without reading the paper? If it can't, then there is a problem. Then is the research gap clearly stated, and is it stated modestly? Is the study purpose or objective clearly stated? Are the methods described? Are specific results reported, not general statements? And then is a conclusion and its implication included? Ask yourself again, is it within the required word limits? Are all acronyms defined on first use? Then is jargon minimized or explained? In fact, if possible, avoid jargon completely. Then is the abstract written in active voice where possible? Does the format match the submission requirements? And were the keywords carefully chosen? These are some of the things. Here is one abstract. I'll read through it quickly, and I hope I have enough time to read through this. And then we can try to break it down. The topic here is gender-based inequities in Nigeria's creative sector. Sorry, let me see. I think, okay. A mixed method study of female creatives in selected states. And this is the abstract. Nigeria's creative industry is one of the fastest growing economic sectors in Africa, contributing significantly to GDP and youth employment. However, women creatives continue to face systemic gender-based inequities, including pay gaps, limited access to funding, leadership exclusion, and high rates of workplace harassment. Despite growing global attention to gender equity in creative industries, context-specific empirical evidence from Nigeria remains limited. This study examined the nature, prevalence, and impact of gender-based inequities experienced by female creatives in Nigeria's major creative subset. That is film, music, fashion. Research adopted the mixed methods design. A structured survey was administered to 585 female creatives across 6 geopolitical zones. In addition, 35 in-depth semi-structured interviews were conducted with purposefully selected female professionals who had experienced workplace harassment, gender discrimination, and other inequities. Quantitative data were analyzed using descriptive and inferential statistics, while qualitative data underwent thematic analysis using NVivo software. Findings revealed widespread inequities, and then to the specifics, 68% of respondents reported experiencing gender-based harassment, 57% faced discrimination in contract negotiations, and only 24% had accessed formal funding. Women in film and music reported the highest rates of sexual harassment. Interview participants highlighted patriarchal gatekeeping, work-life balance challenges, and weak legal protections. Statistical analysis showed significant associations between sector, years of experience, and severity of inequities. The p-value is less than 0.01. Gender-based inequities remain deeply entrenched in Nigeria's creative sector, undermining both individual careers and industry growth. The study recommends targeted policy interventions, including mandatory gender equity guidelines, stronger enforcement of anti-harassment laws, and women-focused funding schemes. Okay, I'll just move on to an analysis of that abstract. If you look at the first part, that's where we have the background, and the idea there is to establish contexts and to show the significance of the problem. Now, it's always important that we show urgency and then show that the study is important. That is, you should leave the reader thinking that if we don't give attention to this particular topic, then there is a problem. So that's the idea here. You want to create urgency. You want to show that this is a very important study. The extent to which you're able to do that is the extent to which you can hook the reader. And immediately after the background you want to talk about the objective. And if you look at this abstract that we just read, it goes on to say the study examined the nature, the prevalence, and impacts of gender-based inequities experienced by female creatives and so on. So that's the idea there. It clearly shows what the study set out to investigate. So if after your background, it's not clear what the study set out to achieve, then there is a problem. So once you're done with that, the next thing will be the methods. You want to clearly describe your research design, the sources of data, how you collected the data, how you analyzed the data. Okay, and you'll see that we're reporting this in the past tense. We're talking about what was done. And then the results section, we're reporting specific, like we've said, specific findings rather than maybe very general statements talking about the results. So we have to be specific. And then the conclusion. So the conclusion is something we need to give attention to. The conclusion has to interpret the findings. And then, where possible, propose solutions, so to say, based on the evidence that's based on the results that we have. Okay, and then it's always important that we end with a broader implication. For instance, if you look at this, it says the measures are essential for building a more inclusive and sustainable creative economy in Nigeria. So you want to end with a broader statement that goes beyond those specific, those granular details that you have explored in your study. So yes, we're putting forward solutions. We're talking about the implications maybe for research, implications for policy, implications for practice. But beyond that, we also want to show broader implications of the study. Okay. So your conclusion will restate the finding, will make clear recommendations. This is not compulsory. Some researchers, for instance, will say that it's not their responsibility to make recommendations. It's their responsibility, depending on your paradigm. It's their responsibility to do the study and provide the evidence, and then people can do with the evidence what they wish. Okay, but it's important that we end with a broader implication. And all of these can be done in 3 sentences. Okay, so this is the ideal structure. So from what we've been saying, if we ask ourselves what makes an abstract competitive, don't forget, it is not just about writing an abstract. It's writing an abstract that will be selected when there are 100 submissions, there are 100 submissions, and the committee has the responsibility of selecting just 10. So you need to be concise, and you need to be comprehensive. You need to keep your audience in mind, and you need to follow the guidelines. If there are specific guidelines, you need to follow them. Okay, so writing a clear, concise, and complete abstract is not just a technical requirement. It is how you make your research accessible, discoverable, and credible. So I say your abstract is your study's best advocate. That's what will speak for that study. You will not be there. The abstract will be there to speak for the study. And you should respect your readers' time. You don't make them feel they have wasted their time. Sometimes people read and they just feel, no, I wasted my time reading this thing. Okay, so you should make that abstract work hard. I'll end by saying that your abstract is the door to your research. It determines whether people will walk through that door or just walk away. It is your own testimonial. It just tells people who you are. And then it will go where you may never go. And it will be around for a long, long time. So you think about that. Okay, I see a question here. Can we talk about theories in an abstract? If the theories help you frame your analysis, yes, you can. But you know that it's always a battle being able to squeeze all of that in. So it's something you want to approach with care. Yes, you can put together, you can maybe use a couple of sentences to describe the theories underpinning your study and how you have used that in framing your analysis. Yes.
All right, thank you, Prof. There's a question here. Somebody said, how many sentences with maximum?
What can we say about using AI as a guide to writing a research paper? Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But the challenge is that often when people use AI, they begin to rely so much on it. And then AI starts to give them, AI begins to hallucinate. And then so if you must use AI very wisely, very wisely. AI can guide you, yes. Okay, so, but AI can't write for you. And if you allow AI to write for you, it's going to show. AI can do what you will do as a researcher. So yes, maybe as a guide, yes, but it can't do the writing for you. Okay, is the extended abstract same as structured abstract? No. So an extended abstract is a fuller version of the work. For instance, you could have an extended abstract that is running into maybe some pages. Sometimes you have extended abstracts up to 6 pages. So it's not the same thing as a structured. The structured abstract is still an abstract. It is short. It typically won't go beyond maybe 300, 350 words. What is the standard for the keywords after the abstract? Are words from the title allowed? Okay, so it's not about what is allowed. It is about what is helpful. If you put words from your title, you're wasting those words because the words in the title are already going to assist the discoverability of the work. So if you want keywords, it's advisable, don't waste those keywords. You choose keywords outside words in your title so that you can increase, because when you talk about keywords, those are the words. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this now. Okay, so when people are doing a search, for instance, and they type those keywords, your work will come up because you have listed those keywords. What if you don't list those keywords? When people type those words, your work may not come up. Okay. So in essence, the keywords increase the discoverability of your paper. And so if already you have words in your title, you don't need to repeat them as keywords. You should take other words so that you can increase the discoverability of your words, of your work. What if there is no specific instruction on the type of abstracts that should be used? Which of these abstracts is most recommended? You should make your abstract informative if you're thinking about purpose, and if you're thinking about whether it is structured or unstructured. My advice to you is that you make it structured. It helps you. If you have a structured abstract, it has a way of showing you if you're not doing the right thing. And if you're leaving anything out, it shows you. It's easier to forget things when your abstract is unstructured. Okay. How many sentences will be maximum for an abstract? That depends. Some journals will say 250. Some conference organizers will say 250. Some will say 300. So you should just follow the guideline. Some can take up to 350 words. So it depends on the journal. And as you're writing, you should start familiarizing yourself with good journals where you hope to publish your work. So you have an idea of how many words are acceptable to them. Can we clarify formatting requirements for an abstract? Specifically, should it use a particular line spacing, font? Line spacing, all these ones depend on the journal. Some, or maybe your institution, or the organizing committee. So some will say single line spacing, but I think organizers are more interested in the number of words, whether it's a single line or double line. There is greater emphasis on the number of words. So you have noticed variation in published abstracts, definitely, because journals differ. They have different preferences. Some journals will say do 300 words. Some will say do 250 words. So you just need to check. In terms of formatting, ultimately, the journal will decide whether they want it single line spaced or double or whatever. So even if you leave it unformatted, it's not a serious problem, except the guideline clearly specifies formatting instructions. Otherwise, you're at liberty to just write the way you want. Which aspect of the abstract should get more word counts or emphases? Okay, so the sections that should get more word counts usually will be the background and the results. The background and your results. So in terms of allotment of words based on the different aspects, you want to push me to do what ordinarily I wouldn't like to do, because there are no hard and fast rules actually. But you just keep in mind that it's important that you give attention to the background. The background has to be clear. Your research problem. So that's the first part people will read, the background. And that's where you want to grab their attention. Okay. And that's where you also state your objective. So that section usually will take up to maybe 30–40% of the number of words. Your methods, the methods usually will not be too long. Your conclusion also will not be too long, but your results. So the background or the introduction, and then the results will typically take more space, more words than other sections. Okay, I think we have dealt with most of the questions. I don't know whether there is any other one. How many sentences for an abstract? We have talked about that. Okay, over to you, allow me.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that has been a part of this afternoon. We are so grateful for your time, and I'm sure we have learned a lot. I will be handing over to Dr. Bain now.
Thank you, Olaomi. Thank you, Prof, for giving us this very insightful insight into what an abstract looks like. Even the best of the best, we still struggle how to put up all our ideas in a very concise way. So thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I also want to use this opportunity to thank all of our attendees for, finding out time to join us to have this very beautiful conversation. And I will just key into it by saying that this should be a pathway to inviting you for our upcoming conference that's a part of the Gender Summit that the Policy Innovation Center is known for. So on the first day, on the day 0 of the Gender Summit, we will be hosting an academic conference. And so we are expecting and looking forward to seeing you all writing amazing abstracts based on the guideline that Professor Kunuji has showcased to us this afternoon. We look forward to having your submissions, although it's a gender summit per se, but we are assuring you that all of our thematic areas are speaking to various issues, social issues that we are, interrogating or investigating on. So please look forward to our call for abstract that will be coming out any moment from now. And so we are looking forward to having your very beautiful abstracts presentation. We are looking forward to reading from you, to reading your beautiful research and everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Olaomi. I don't know if I'm expected to close or if you, Kem is going to say something before we close officially.
Please go ahead and Dr. Bain.
Okay, so thank you. On behalf of the Policy Innovation Center, Able Director, Dr. Sasuyi, we really appreciate you for coming here, and we wish you a beautiful part of the evening, remaining part of the evening. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.